The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before we hand over the floor to counsel for Mr. Evidentiary to put questions to the civil party, the Chamber wishes to remind Mr. Eun to be patient when responding to questions. The Chamber has already informed Mr. Eun already that you are before the court and you are being cross-examined by parties to the proceeding, and please compose yourself, be patient to respond to each and every question posed by counsels or parties. The Chamber wishes to also remind you to be attentive to the questions and try your best to respond to the questions other than making some other comments that are not relevant to the questions. It is a waste of time and it causes some confusion as well. So we would like now to hand over to counsel for Mr. Evidentiary to proceed with his questions. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon, everyone in and around the courtroom. And again, good afternoon, sir. Now let's pick up where we left off. And I want to refer to your testimony of the 23rd of August, 2012, Khmer page 80, French 92 to 93, in English it's 89, and it would be right above 15.19.04 on the clock. And your answer here, and you touched on this a little bit earlier when you were being questioned by the Nunchia team, I saw foreigners, Chinese and Koreans, who came to provide medical training at the hospital, and Mr. Tune was very good at that. I saw him who gave training, and I still recognize him if he would be standing here today. He was of a medium build. He taught us about the scientific medical matters, and the Korean and Chinese also assisted us with the operation techniques. Now, from this answer, sir, it would appear that Mr. Tune was, in fact, providing you with training. Is that correct?
Response: yes, it is.
And when you say that he was very good at it, can you please tell us whether he also explained, as part of the training, the importance of being a doctor and the importance of providing good medical treatment?
Response: he did not explain this to us.
Well, did he explain to you that you should not be good doctors, that you should not be ethical?
Response: I don't recall having heard him saying these words.
Was the medical training that you received in Phnom Penh under Mr. Tune or the Korean or Chinese or others who were teaching you, did they teach you proper medical techniques, at least as far as you understood them to be?
Response. These individuals provided us with proper medical training.
Now let's look at another portion of your testimony, same day, Khmer page 90 to 91, French 104, English page 101, and again this is right above 15.53.21. You tell us the following. Upon my return from Phnom Penh to my base, Sector 20, I went back to my own office, and I was in charge of training of other medical training, and I was also in charge of the political training sessions for people at the base as well. And I also went to inspect other hospitals as well when time permitted. I would go to see if there was an outbreak of disease or epidemic diseases in other district hospitals. Let's focus on this answer of yours. Aside from the medical training that you performed back at the base at Sector 20, could you please explain to us the political training that you were providing at these sessions to the people at the base?
Response. I used to give some instructions and advice to our people on the hygiene or sanity. So I provided some training sessions on these aspects.
All right, so when you talk about political training, at least the political training that you were involved in was on hygiene and proper sanitary living conditions. Is that what your answer is?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
And who authorized you to provide this sort of political training?
Response. Ta Ut, the head of the hospital at Sector 20, who ordered this.
And can you please tell us which other hospitals you would go to inspect them and to see whether there would be outbreak of diseases or epidemics? Where would they be?
Response. I inspected the hospital at communes. I remember going to Kanchriech commune in the Kanchriech district, Smaung Khang Tabong of Kamchai Mir district.
And were these hospitals similar to the one at Sector 20 where you were located and where you were practicing?
Response. With regard to treatment at commune level, they did not have proper medicine as those at the provincial hospital. They used the rapid pellet medicines.
All right. Now, prior to 1975, were there proper hospitals in that area?
Response. Prior to 1975, in Zone 20, says the civil party, there was a proper hospital.
All right. Now, I want to focus on another part of your testimony where you indicated about operations and experimentation. So let's focus on Khmer page 78 to 79, French page 91, English 87. This is again of the transcript of the 23rd of August. And I want some clarification here, if you would provide it to us. You were asked, were there any medical operation conducted on people as part of experiment? And your answer is, at the 17 April Hospital, or Cambodia Soviet Friendship Hospital, there were medical doctors who were from Sector 20. It was the largest hospital in the country back then. I did not witness any medical operation, but I did see this happening at the base when people who were expected to be executed had to go under medical operation as part of the experiment. They were operated on alive. And then later on you say, the truth is that I was also involved in this. And then you go on to say, and trainees would be asked to look at how the fingers would be cut and removed. So let's look at this part of your testimony. You did not see any medical experimentation in Phnom Penh. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is. I only witnessed such medical experimentation in Sector 20 at the military hospital in that sector.
And Sector 20 is where you were working.
Response. Yes, it was. I worked at the normal people hospital, general hospital, but then I saw this happening at the military hospital.
But then you go on to say, the truth is, I was also involved in this. And so can you please explain to us to what extent you were involved in experimenting on live patients?
Response. This suggests that I saw the people who were destined to be executed would then be used for this medical experimentation where their parts of the body would undergo the vivisection.
All right, well, help us out a little bit, because earlier I pointed out to where you said that when you returned to the base, you began training people on medical techniques. You then go on this part of your testimony where you say trainees, that is, people that were being trained, were being asked to look at how the fingers were cut and removed. You say that you were involved in this. Now you're telling us you were merely observing at a hospital that you were not working. Can you please tell us honestly to what extent you yourself was involved in experimenting?
Response. At that time, the involvement here was about seeing, being there to see when people were cut, their fingers were cut and removed, their flesh were vivisected and removed, and the operation was on a small scale and a large scale, and we were there to engage in observing the operation when it was being carried out. So we were told to look at this operation precisely before we could operate on any other persons. Although they told us that people could be destined for execution, but we had to operate on them professionally, technically.
All right, if you were there as a mere observer, can you please tell us who invited you to go there to observe these medical techniques, particularly when you were already a trained medic or doctor with some 14 years of experience?
Response. I think it is easily understood that if a person who was perceived to be executed, then after all he would be killed, so we just follow what the order or instruction would be rendered by the party.
Sir, I'm asking you a very concrete question. You were there at Sector 20. You were there training both on medical techniques and on political ideology. I'm asking you for a concrete answer. Who invited you to the medical hospital for you to observe these operations? Give us a name.
Response. The person who allowed me to bring trainees to the place was the party of that sector and also people who were in charge of the hospital.
All right, but well, based on that answer, let me just press a little bit. Are you saying you were voluntarily going there as an observant, or were you being ordered to do so?
Response. As a trainer, we had to be with trainees, and whether trainees had to perform anything, we had to be abided by the order by the party. So the head of the party at that location was the head of the hospital who ordered us.
And who was the head of the party, who was head of the hospital, who was ordering you? That's what I'm asking. because presumably that's the person that was ordering you to go there to make these observations and to train others.
Response. I think you should understand that everyone had to obey the order. No one was more powerful than the head of the hospital. It was the head of the hospital who ordered us to do this, so we just followed that person's orders.
Let me ask it one last time. Who is the head of the hospital? If you don't know, say, I don't know. Give us a name. Who? What is the name of the person that was the head of the hospital that was ordering you there, sir?
Response. Well, that person was Ta'ut.
Thank you. Now, if we look on the next page, you were asked the question, who ordered such operations? You've just told us who ordered you to go and observe these operations. And so now I would like you to answer the question which you did not answer before. Who ordered such operations? And for the record, I'm referring to Khmer page 79, French 91 to 92, English page 88, and it's right below 15.15.20.
Response. The person who ordered such operation was the party representative for the hospital within that sector.
Again, if you could provide us with a name, sir. You know what I'm asking. Please provide us that information so I can move on to the next section and not have to ask the question 5 more times.
Response. I don't know whether you have obtained this or not yet, because I said that Ta'ut was the head of the hospital and the one who ordered all this.
Thank you. And where is that individual today, if you know?
Response. I do not know whether he is still alive or deceased.
All right. Now, is Ta'ut, is that his alias or is that his real name?
Response. I do not know whether he used other names, but I knew him to have only this name, Ta'ut.
All right, thank you. Now, let's move on to another topic, the topic of Bore Kilai, where you've told us you've received some training, some political training. And the question that I'm most interested in is whether you saw Mr. Ing Sri. So let's look at some of what you've said so far. On transcript of 23 August 2012, which is page 79 in 70 to 71 in Khmer, 79 in English, and for the French, I must apologize, I don't have it, but it would be right below 14.27.16, you were asked a question, and then this is your answer. At the time, I saw Comrade Pol Pot, and I saw Mr. Nunchia, Mr. Kusapon, and I am not sure whether or not I saw Mr. Ieng Sary. This is what you said then. Now let's look at your testimony from yesterday. And you were initially asked by the prosecutor the following. Did you ever see Mr. Pol Pot, Ieng Sary, Nunchia, or Kyu Sampon when they were there? And this is on page 19 of yesterday's transcript. It would be right below 09.52.37. So did you ever see? This is the question being asked by the prosecutor yesterday. Your answer is, concerning those four people, I have met them, but very briefly when I was attending political training at Borikilai. So based on the question, it would appear now you're saying that you met Mr. Ieng Sary. Now let's look at, later on, right above 10.14.03 of yesterday's testimony on page 26 in English, where the same prosecutor says, at our hearing last Thursday, you mentioned Yun Yat, Pol Pot, Nunchia, Kyu Sampon, and Hunim as being among the leaders who spoke or who delivered speeches at the political education sessions that you attended, and you said that with respect to Ieng Sary, you weren't absolutely sure about him. Now, of course, in your previous answer, there's nothing about absolutely. That was thrown in by the prosecutor. Let me ask you, before we go to what else you stated on this issue. As you sit here today, do you have an independent recollection of ever seeing Mr. Ieng Sary over there during that political training?
Response. Yes, I did see him. I did not do anything, but just saw him.
All right. That's your testimony today, that now you're certain. Before you weren't certain, you weren't absolutely certain, but now you're certain. Okay. Well, let's see what you've said when you were filling out these forms. And we'll start off with D22/3963. And this is part of your supplemental information to the document, to file with the Documentation Center of Cambodia. The Khmer page is 00573976-77. French 00786185. English 00751867. This is what you say, sir. I saw Mr. Pol Pot, Nunchia, Mr. Kyu Sampon, and Ms. Ieng Sary there. Can you please point out to me, sir, where do you say that you saw Mr. Ieng Sary there? Take your time. Point it out to me. Would it be fair to say, sir, would it be fair to say, sir, that you didn't say anything? You don't mention Mr. Ingsari there.
Response. I can say that sometime in questions I may be mistaken, and I saw some people in the leadership and I did see Mr. Ingsari, but I just did not wish to mention this seriously and did not want to go further on that.
All right. Well, first of all, let's look at this. Is this, sir, not a statement that you yourself wrote out? This is the same one, by the way, where you claim that you had no medical background. In fact, we're on the same page. You wrote this out, did you not?
Response. Yes, I did.
So this was not in response to questions. This is what you put down yourself when you were trying to make an application to become a civil party, right?
Response. Yes, it is.
And when you filed this application, were you not trying to be serious?
Response. Well, I have been very serious. When I filed this application, I was very serious because I have lost my loved ones. And for that, I have to lodge a complaint to voice my concern to make sure that my voice is heard concerning the suffering I have had endured. And I indeed saw these individuals, what they did, it's their business.
Now let's look at D22/3963/1, which is the report on the civil party application. I believe it's dated 30th of April, 2010. Although it would appear that the application was signed on the 29th of January, 2010. But here we see on the very first page, no, I'm sorry, here's what we see it on the second page, and this is only in English, my apologies, but the ERN number is 00573962. Here's what it says. He stated that during his study, he saw the presence of Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Khieu Samphan, and Ng Thurit.
The President, the prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The document that the Ingsari defense is referring to is a report on a civil party application. It's a document that was drawn up by the victim support section that is based on the original of the request, which is the one we have just been talking about, D22/3963. So I don't quite see why the defense needs to read out a summary that was prepared by an external body, which is not a document that has been endorsed by the civil party himself. I think that the defense should limit itself to using the document that was signed by the civil party, 3963 in other words, and I don't see why the submission by the VSS should add anything to this debate. It's just a summary on the basis of what they drew from the form submitted by the civil party. So I think that the defence should refrain from reiterating quotes which serves no particular purpose. In other words, by delving into D22 3963/1. Thank you.
Perfectly happy to move on, Your Honor, but the point that I'm trying to make is that others rely on this information. So if it's misinformation, then obviously the application will have misinformation as well. That is the report on the civil party application. But I'll move on. Let's look at then D230/2/4.2.277A. And the Khmer ERN number is 00508424-26, French 00822270-71, English 00777625. And here you talk about, in 1975, I worked as a Khmer medic. I worked, not studied, but I worked as a Khmer medic at the Russian hospital in Phnom Penh. Then it was quite both outside and inside the hospital. At the time, I was sent to undertake the Communist Party policy at Bori Kilai. I saw and recognized the person who instructed us for an hour. It was Pol Pot. It was followed by Nunchia. And then you mentioned also Khieu Samphan. Nothing about the presence of Mr. Ieng Sary, either as a trainer or being there. Do you see that, sir?
As for Ieng Sary, I actually saw him very briefly, and counsel might have already noticed that. And actually, it took place some 40 years ago, so I have forgotten some of it. It bases on my recollection. I have no way to keep a record of everything, of every memory of the event that unfolded at that time.
Sir, my question is, do you see you naming Mr. Ieng Sary as being present there or giving any instructions? Anything in your statement, do you see it there? It's a yes or no. It's either there on the paper or it's not.
I might have added additional information to that, because in my earlier statement I did not mention him, but later on I added that I saw him briefly.
All right. Well, I've looked at all of your applications. I've looked at everything that you've submitted, and I can't find a single reference where you say where Ieng Sary was there at Bori Kilai and that you saw him there during those training sessions. Can you please tell us when it was it that you mentioned this information and where can we find it?
If you did not see it in my statement in those two forms, why are you asking me that question? You may think it over again. We human beings tend to forget things. So I only acknowledge that these statements belong to me, and I had to try to recall the past event, and I could not at that time recall every detail of it. I had to provide supplementary information later.
All right. Well, I could understand that with Mr. Ing Sari. But let me just go back to what you said earlier about having no medical background. When you provided that information to DC CAM, had it slipped your mind because of the passage of years that you had absolutely no medical background for nearly 13 or 14 years, and that's why you put down no medical background?
The President, witness, please hold on. The prosecutor, you may proceed.
Oui, j'aurais deux remarques. Two comments, if I may, Mr. President. The first is the tone that we are hearing here from the Ieng Sary Defence Counsel. It's a tone which can be heard in this courtroom as being aggressive, and I really don't think it's appropriate in this courtroom to try and destabilise a civil party like this. My second point is that with respect to that medical training, earlier on I made an objection on the subject because the civil party had been perfectly clear by saying I didn't have a necessarily formal medical training with a diploma, but yes, I did have informal training of a kind. The Defence Counsel is coming back to this subject. We've just spent at least an hour on it. The civil party said what he had to say about it, and I really don't believe there's any need to come back to it by talking about Borikela. Those are my objections, Mr. President.
Just very briefly, Mr. President, the reason I came back to it is because he claimed amnesia as to why he wasn't able to remember Ieng Sary all of a sudden. He does remember him, but in all the other opportunities he was given, he never mentions him. Because things, obviously, after 40 years, you can't remember every detail. And given that explanation, I wanted perhaps the gentleman to explain, maybe now that we've established that he had 14 years of medical training, why he said he had absolutely no background in medicine. Not formal training, but no background. Was it because it was a lapse of memory, or was it because the gentleman was simply not telling the truth when he was filling out his application?
The President, the objection and the grounds for objection by the prosecutions are valid and thus sustained. So, counsel, please move on to the next question.
You told us, sir, that you were forced to marry and that then you got a divorce. May I ask when it was that you got the divorce?
សូមលើកឡើងពីបញ្ហាលែង
Would like to discuss a bit on the divorce. I know that my statement concerning my personal divorce affairs might not be conducive to the court proceeding now. The President, witness, you are instructed to respond to the question. I have already advised you that it is a discretion of the chamber to decide whether or not you should respond to the question. Otherwise, you should respond to all the questions posed by you. So you may proceed.
Let me
The President, I note the lead co-lawyer for the civil party is on his feet. You may proceed. Lawyer Pich Ong. Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, this question has already been asked, and the civil party himself have answered to this question. And I understand the President's direction that the civil party has the duty to respond to the question. And I believe that then the accused should be bound by this duty as well to respond to the questions put by other parties. President, well, we understand very clearly that if the civil party exercises its right to remain silent from the beginning, then we would not have summoned him to come to testify before this court from the very beginning. So if you exercise the right to remain silent, then you should remove the names of the civil party from the list to be appearing before the chamber, so that it also saves the court time. So you may examine this case again. I am afraid that you may be confused in terms of these procedures before us. So, Counsel Canavas, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me ask the question again. You told us last week, and I have the transcript pages, it was on the 23rd of August, on page 52 in English. It's 42 in Khmer, 56 in French, and then again on the same day we find it on page Khmer 93 to 94, French 108, and English 104, where you talk about getting divorced from the wife that you were forced to marry. Now my question to you, sir, is a very simple one. Do you recall the year when you got divorced from that wife?
I do recall the date when we got divorced. Actually, I got divorced in 2002.
Thank you. Now, if we could look at D22/3963, which is the statement that you wrote out in your own handwriting to the documentation center, Khmer pages 0057, 39, 81 to 82, I believe. English 00751868, and French 00766187. It's on page 8 in the English version. This is what you wrote when you were providing the information to DC CAM, when you asked them to help you with your application, to which you told us you were serious about. Upon returning to my village, the Anka was arranging my marriage with my current wife. Now, it would appear that when you wrote this out, it's 2010. Or I'm sorry, it says supplemental here, it might have been January 29, 2012. So, were you being honest and truthful and accurate when you wrote out that it was the current wife that you had been forced to marry? In other words, you didn't get a divorce, or at least you weren't aware that you had gotten a divorce when you wrote this thing out.
No,
Lawyer, I got divorced with my first wife in 2002, and then I married another wife. I did not want to dwell on this personal matter. I simply mentioned that I had my first wife and the second wife, but in my statement earlier to your question, I did not distinguish between the first and the second wife.
All right. So when you put down here, my current wife, that was a false statement. It certainly wasn't accurate.
If you consider it a false statement, I do not object against this statement. Of course, at that time, I made an error in writing it.
Thank you. Now, I want to switch topics, and this is my last topic, and I will go very gently on this, but nonetheless, I'm compelled to ask questions, and this is in regards to your father. You state in D22/3963, and it's Khmer page 00573974-75, French 00786184, English 00751866. You say that in 1974, my father, Uk Sam was arrested by Sao Pim, chief of the East Zone, under the pretext of being called for a study. Since then, he has disappeared. At the time, he was the Sector 20 committee. He was on the Sector 20 committee. Only up to 1975 did I know that he had been taken to be killed when he was invited for the study. And then you mentioned others who were present, who were also taken, but survived, and you named them Mao Chiang, Mr. Sim Ka, and then Mr. Kiev Saron, and others. So the year that you put down here is 1974. Now, if we could go to document D22/3963 at Khmer 00573986-87, French 00786192-93, English 00751872, and this is supplemental information that was added. You state, approximately in early 1977, my father was summoned by the Anka to undertake study at the center. In parentheses, Salpim was the man who summoned him, in the parentheses, and he has disappeared since then. Do you see the difference between 74 and 77? Do you see the difference, sir?
Response. Here I stated that I provided the information to people who assisted me, people from DC camp who brought the document to me for giving some print. I did not have time to review these thoroughly. The 77 would not be the correct one. I prefer the other statement which says 1974. I think the story is still the same. The problem is that the date was not correctly input.
All right, let me make sure I understand it. You're saying that your father was taken away in 1974. That is based on your recollection and knowledge.
Response. I think I need to elaborate on this to clear some doubt. I believe that the documents are here before us, and at that time I stated that my mother died after she saw her husband was taken away. So I just stated that my mother died after she witnessed my father being taken away. So I did not state that my mother died in any particular year. So it is true that my mother died after my father was taken away. So I believe that the date was not specified in my statement, so it was not correctly put. But again, the veracity of the story is still there. It's still true that that was the event, and I had a mistake for not paying great attention to verify the date when it was written.
All right. Well, let me go back, and again, I apologize for having to dwell on this. But both these documents, the first one, which was of 29 January 2012, which was to DC CAM, D22/3963, at Khmer pages 00573974-75, French 00766184, English 00751866, where you say, the first document where you say 1974, you wrote that out. That was in your handwriting.
Response. I think I need to be more precise here before I will be put more questions on this. The dates were not really properly put, and I have a problem remember the exact date, and I apologize for this. The President intervenes. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Mr. Civil Party. We should now observe a brief adjournment before we could resume. We adjourn for 15 minutes. Court officer is now instructed to assist the Civil Party during the break.
សូមក្រោកឈរ